Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Mortal Kombat 2 for lots of different systems, but it did start in arcades, and the version you're seeing in this video is of Mortal Kombat Arcade Collection on PC, which was also released on PS3 and Xbox 360. Mortal Kombat 2 is a game that really needs no introduction, but I'll give it one anyway. It was released in arcades in 1993 and is obviously the sequel to the original Mortal Kombat, which at the time had taken arcades by storm. On the top of this, it spawned a huge amount of controversy with the graphic violence and the gruesome fatality moves, which, if you look back on today, they look really tame. Well, Mortal Kombat 2 comes along. They decide to up the ante with a lot of things. And the end result is a game whose legacy is unquestionable. It spawned numerous clones. Things like the Eternal Champions game, which I never actually played, but I've seen it and it looks pretty ridiculous. And all sorts of other rip-offs that were just all about the graphic violence, and they were really, really terrible games just trying to ride on Mortal Kombat 2's success. And this is frequently cited as the best game in the series by hardcore fans of the series. But here's the question. Does it stand the test of time? I mean, Mortal Kombat 2 was released quite a long time ago now. We're talking around 20 years now. So, how has it stood up over the years? Is it like Mortal Kombat 1, where the game was more of a historical curiosity these days than a properly fun fighting game? It's not a bad game by any means, it's just very dated. So what about Mortal Kombat 2? Does it fall into that same pit? Well, as far as its presentation goes, it is certainly very, very dated. Granted, consider how old this game is, and you can understand that. Plus, they happened to be using what was effectively the best tech at the time, and they did a very good job with it. And it was certainly an improvement over the original Mortal Kombat. I mean, look at the improved color palettes, the smoother animations, although they're still rather jerky in a lot of spots. Even though it's pixelated, there's more detail in the characters than there was in the original game. The environments are a bit more detailed. The art style is more coherent as opposed to just being digitized actors in a sort of arena setting that was very, very plain. There's more stuff to be had here as far as the visuals go. And so, it is a definite improvement over the original Mortal Kombat. But, it is very dated. And digitized actors don't age as well as normal sprites. So, that's something to keep in mind. When you get to the sound design, it's still gloriously cheesy. The voice acting in particular is just completely absurd, and you can't help but love it, just because it's so cheesy. And then there's the music, which was never a particularly strong point in this series, but they did a very good job with it here. There are a few memorable tracks. In particular, The Tower is one of the tracks I remember most in this game. And actually, I felt like the remake that was fairly recent, MK9, didn't do it very good justice. But that's beside the point. The overall sound design is certainly an improvement over the original game. The sound quality is quite a bit better, and that really does help it out quite a lot. So, you see improvements from MK1 across the board. But how's that aged? Well, visually, it's not as good as it used to be, obviously. It's very pixelated. But it still has this charm about it. And you really can't put your finger on it once you're actually in the game, but the visuals are still kind of appealing in this almost cheesy way. And the sound design, again, has this charm about it that's almost incredibly cheesy, but at the same time, you can't help but enjoy it. So, despite being as old as it is, and really not aging all that well in a technical sense, it has enough charm that it really doesn't matter all that much. But obviously what really matter here are the story and the gameplay, and this is actually where the story started to take shape of Mortal Kombat. In the original game, it had a very, very basic story about a martial arts tournament. In this one, they expanded upon things and had Shang Tsung, the guy who hosted the original Mortal Kombat tournament, going to his master and basically pleading for his life, his master being the evil Emperor Shao Kahn. And so Shao Kahn ends up creating a new Mortal Kombat tournament, and the stakes are basically Earthrealm survival, Earthrealm being obviously just Earth. And that's where most of the main characters are from, people like Liu Kang and Johnny Cage and Kung Lao and all these different characters. And they basically go into this Mortal Kombat tournament to try to defeat Shao Kahn and stop him from taking over Earthrealm. Because he's an evil emperor, that's what he does. But apart from that, it's a fairly simple storyline, and it doesn't really get too involved except for in the beginning of the game and the ending of the game. Each character does have their own specific non-canonical ending, but the canon ending is with Liu Kang being victorious. And so this is one of those weird instances where story actually kinda got decent. It wasn't amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but they actually put some effort into it and gave the game lore. It was cool. And so now characters actually had some backstory to them, and they had reasons for doing things. It was just interesting, as opposed to just having a diverse cast of characters who were just kinda in it for reasons that aren't exactly explained all that well. I mean, let's face it, fighting games in the early 90s and late 80s were, mostly the early 90s, were pretty simplistic. MK2 tried to expand upon things, and it did a pretty good job of it for the most part. But then there's the gameplay. Now, a lot of people really latched on to Mortal Kombat 1's gameplay. It was simple, it was effective, a lot of times it was really cheesy, but Mortal Kombat 2 took it to another level. They introduced new systems, like simulation of gravity, for instance. And so you have a smoother fighting game experience as a result. They tweaked some things here and there. There was really no functionality that was lost. All of the cast from the previous game returned, and a lot of them actually saw some improved movesets, different styles of fatality. Like Sub-Zero, for instance, is one of the first to actually have a very strange fatality in which he actually has a two-stage fatality. You had to do one move, and then you had to do another move to actually pull off the fatality. But they see expanded movesets, new maneuvers, cool new characters with their own spins on things like Kung Lao and his razor-rimmed hat. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire series. You saw the arrival of series staples like Jax, for instance, and Kitana, Melina, Jade, so on and so forth. And it was an interesting game. It was basically an expansion of Mortal Kombat in every single way. But then there was the one problem. You see, expanding upon the mechanics and tweaking things, making it a smoother fighting game experience that actually plays really, really well if you're playing against someone else, resulted in one unfortunate downside. You've probably noticed it throughout this video. It's that the AI is complete BS. Now, whether this is intentional or not, I'm not entirely sure. But even if you set it to the absolute lowest difficulty, the AI is ludicrously good at being cheap. They're able to hit you when you can't hit them, even though it doesn't look like they've moved any closer to you than you were to them. Sometimes your moves will just go straight through them, because their hitbox happened to be off or something like that. They're able to block pretty much anything you throw at them. They're able to dodge pretty much anything you throw at them. And they're always seem capable of pulling off powerful maneuvers that you don't seem to be able to pull off yourself, because the game decided, hey, we're going to be cheap with the AI. So they'll hit you when it doesn't seem like they could possibly hit you, things like that. It's infuriating. And this is actually my #1 problem with this game. Believe it or not, I actually really enjoy this game. except for the fact that I hate it at the same time. You see, this kind of introduced the idea of Mortal Kombat being kind of bipolar. There are the moments where everything clicks, when you're having this really good run, and you're just beating the living crap out of all your opponents, you're pulling off fatalities and other finishing moves like babalities, which are actually really funny, and all sorts of different things. Left, right, and center, you feel awesome. And then you run into things like Shao Kahn, who is ludicrously cheap and is able to annihilate you in seconds. You run into things like the AI being able to just have all of your attacks ghost through them because you were just a tiny pixel off or something like that, and yet they're able to annihilate you incredibly easily. So that part of the game is infuriating. Playing against the AI is terrible. You have to basically cheat to actually be able to win. And what I mean by that is you have to employ incredibly cheap tactics yourself. When you actually get into a proper two-player match, it's absolutely fantastic. It's an incredibly fun game. The fights tend to be pretty tense. The movesets are all varied enough that each character feels unique, even if they are a palette swap, basically. But you would think that with characters like, say, Reptile and Scorpion and Sub-Zero, who all use the same palettes and everything. But they play radically different. And you have all these different things blending together to make an absolutely fantastic fighting game experience when you're playing against other people. When you're playing against the AI, it's infuriating and just a complete waste of time, really. What ends up happening is what you're seeing in this video, which is basically me struggling to actually do anything. Getting the footage for this game was awful just because of that. The game plays fine when you're playing against someone else, and ultimately that's the way I have to recommend playing this thing. Get a friend with you and play this game, and you will have an absolutely fantastic time. If you play against the AI, you're just going to be in for a lot of pain, because that's what the AI does. Even on the lowest difficulty, it just annihilates you. But does it stand the test of time as a proper fighting game? Absolutely. Is it the best game in the MK series? Well, objectively, probably. Subjectively, it's not my favorite, actually. I mean, I have a ton of fun playing it, sure, when I'm playing against other people, but that AI problem really just kills it for me. I actually much prefer MK3 to MK2, as far as just playing the game in general goes. Even though MK3 is actually not as good of a game, as far as fighting games go. But Mortal Kombat 2 is one of those games where its legacy is undeniable. You really can't look at this thing and say, oh, it was just a blip in history. No, it was a seminal moment for the entire fighting game genre. It saw the creation of basically an entire subgenre, which was the Gore Fest fighting game. And it emerged on top of that, because all these others were imitators rather than innovators and successors. And Mortal Kombat continues to this day. A couple of years ago, we saw the release of the latest game in the series, MK9, also just known as Mortal Kombat, the version released in 2011. And now we're about to see MKX get released next year. The series is still going strong. It's had its ups and downs, with MK2 basically being the pinnacle of the series up until the more recent one, which I'll get to that more when I review that. But suffice to say, Mortal Kombat 2 definitely earns its spot in history, and even today it's still an absolutely fantastic fighting game that I can easily recommend to any fighting game fan. And if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you definitely need to play it. That said, just be warned that the AI is complete BS, and you're really best off playing this thing with a buddy, or just with a group of friends. Just alternate the players. Or, even better, play it on an arcade machine. Seriously, that experience is unrivaled. At any rate, I very highly recommend MK2. Just make sure you know what you're getting into first. Thanks for watching.